Hurricane Nicole may have caused trouble for NASA, especially with the upcoming Artemis I launch that everyone had been looking forward to. According to officials, the rocket got quite damaged because of the event, but the launch remains scheduled for next week regardless. We've been reassured that the issues will be resolved in time, but things don't seem that simple. Let's look more into what the hurricane did. First off, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. The rocket was still on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center when the hurricane showed up. It started as a Category 1 hurricane early morning and was mainly near Cape Canaveral in Florida. It eventually weakened to a tropical storm, but not before it had made the mess it had been expected to. Because of the weather, NASA sadly had to move the launch date 2 days ahead, from November 14th to November 16th. In the middle of a press conference, Jim Free, an associate administrator for NASA's Mission Directorate, talked about the situation. He stated that the harm done was minimal and simple to repair, and that the launch would go ahead as planned. He felt that nothing was stopping them from getting it done on the 16th, and he was excited about all the work that would follow with the launch. It was pretty clear that the administration at NASA doesn't want to make this a big deal, which is understandable considering their tightly scheduled rocket launches and everything they have planned to do once this mission successfully goes to space. Coming up, how much of it was damaged? While talking to the press, Free mentioned that the storm caused a loose caulk, as water had also flooded the crew access arm, though they have been busy cleaning that up. There had also been some disruption in the engine rain covers, but all of it was under control according to him. The arm allows astronauts and technicians to enter and exit the Orion spacecraft. This is essential because the rocket section physically orbits space. One of the umbilicals connecting the rocket boosters produced erratic signals, which eventually prompted the team to shift to a backup harness. NASA stated that delaying the launch date guaranteed that staff would be able to safely come back to work and continue with their inspections, which makes a lot of sense. Artemis will be activated soon, and tests will probably start a day before the launch. The countdown to launch will begin early next week if things go according to plan. If it is certified ready on November 16th, the splashdown will be scheduled for December 11th. On the other hand, if things don't work out and the rocket is still unready to launch, the backup dates will be Saturday, November 19th and Friday, November 25th. According to him, the team's first decision was to keep the rocket on the launch pad, but employees could not return it to the vehicle assembly building before it was too late. The good thing is the gusts did not exceed what the team had predicted the rocket could sustain, which is why damage remained minimal. Moving on, this isn't the first delay, and we wouldn't be surprised if things get delayed for longer, considering how this has happened before. The first delay was in August when the mission was canceled after one of the engines failed to cool down to the required temperature before starting up. They later found out that this was happening because of a malfunctioning sensor, the repairing of which would have taken time. The next attempt to launch had been scheduled for September 3rd, but this got postponed too after officials discovered that it was leaking liquid hydrogen. Hurricane Ian, one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history,
monstrous Hurricane Ian now lashing the Florida peninsula. Ian roaring on shore as a strong Category 4.
Canceled Artemis's third planned launch mission on September 27th. Technically, this launch attempt was the fourth one, which has also gotten delayed. It's starting to seem like the rocket ship has just got bad luck, making us wonder whether this delay will be the final delay for the launch. Finally, what's the goal behind the mission? The mission will not include any astronauts, as it determines whether the U.S. can return to the moon if the possibility creates a consistent moon base for research purposes. The spaceship will fly for approximately 25 days, reaching around 60 miles from the moon before heading toward the Pacific Ocean. NASA also wants to send the first female astronaut to the moon as part of the missions that will follow the Artemis I launch. Not just that, but they've also been prioritizing diversity, as they wanted to include the first astronaut of color in the mission as well. What's more is that the Federal Space Agency intends to build a moon base as a stepping stone to sending astronauts to Mars regularly within 2 to 3 years. Now, moving on to NASA's new mega rocket. First off, how is it better than Saturn V? When NASA first launched its massive rocket toward the moon in July 1969, Earthlings stood and watched in awe wherever they could, whether it was in tiny rooms in Paris or on a large screen in Central Park. Today, it is the most marvelous rocket ever successfully flown, and its name was Saturn V. It could easily carry the weight of 4 buses to the moon, which was highly impressive for its time. Astronauts were sent to the powdery lunar surface almost 6 times, and it also put America's very first space station, called Skylab, into orbit around the Earth. Now, more than than a half-century later, NASA is about to launch a mega rocket even more powerful than Saturn V to the moon. In the aerospace industry, this type of rocket is known as a super heavy lift launch vehicle. Indeed, the Space Launch System (SLS) rocket will most probably surpass Saturn V when it comes to being the most powerful space vehicle to be launched. We can't say it is a better rocket, but it is undeniably intended to do unusual and unprecedented things. The agency plans to use SLS to transport the supplies and human resources needed to set up a permanent residence on the moon. They're even trying to put some astronauts on Mars, which seems impossible to us right now, but who knows? Following up, why was the system needed? Returning to the moon is critical for the future of human exploration and its relations with deeper space. A big exploration issue is how the delicate human body will withstand radiation and isolation in space. Once missions go out to the moon regularly, NASA will learn how to keep humans safe and survive in an unfriendly place like outer space. For this, they needed a system better than Saturn V, and there are reasons why they didn't just go ahead with the older ship. After all, wasn't it supposed to be super good? After the famed Apollo missions had finished, they no longer required a massive moon rocket. So instead, they invested in the ISS and the space shuttle to transport humans and other stuff to Earth's orbit, which was approximately 250 miles above the surface. But when the agency returned to human deep space exploration, they investigated reconstructing a Saturn V rocket or using intact rocket elements from the Apollo era. Of course, Saturn V had already been proven, as it had already completed its tasks. It was the safer and more trustworthy option to go for. What held them back was the fact that recreating Saturn V might have meant going back several decades into technologies and rocket components that were simply no longer available. NASA and its contractors would have had to revive parts and processes, which was a procedure too long. It was easier to design the SLS, keeping in mind the key components of the space shuttle. Finally, it's more than just a rocket. The SLS is different. Whereas Saturn V was just a single rocket with a specific mission, Saturn V had to safely transport the agency people to and from the moon. But SLS can be altered in 6 ways, depending on what sort of mission it's going on. If we were to give an example,
all systems are go. We're about 90 seconds from the launch of Space Shuttle Discovery.
it could transport passengers to the moon sometimes, but other times it could also transport cargo to the lunar surface. Blevins mentioned how it's more like a group of rockets because the SLS is a whole platform.
We are transferring to orbiter internal power at this time. Discovery is now running off its 3 onboard fuel cells.
The many variants are built around the typical 212-foot-tall orange rocket booster in the center, known as the core stage. It serves as the vehicle's backbone and needs a strong one, considering that most of the rocket is made up of massive fuel tanks. The orange rocket stage will continue to fire for more than 8 minutes, after which its fuel will run out. That's not a problem though, because it will have completed its task by then. It will have launched its prized cargo into space.
Space Shuttle Discovery returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
Whether it is the Orion spaceship or something different, we love ourselves a versatile, powerful space system. And that's a wrap, folks. Do you guys think that the Artemis I launch will be delayed again? Tell us in the comments below. And as always, click that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more updates about the space world. See you in the next video.